Students' silent revenge, the teacher who never saw it coming. This happened in the early 2000s, in my junior year of high school. The district had just built the third high school in our city, and most of the teachers were new. The band director was one of those new hires. He was qualified for the job, but had zero people skills and was extremely abrasive toward students. He had previously taught university and could not wrap his head around the fact that high school students are not college-level music majors who live in practice rooms and write symphonies in their sleep. His normal behavior consisted of berating students for not knowing university-level curriculum, talking down to everyone about how he can't understand why they were so incompetent, and stopping rehearsals to go on long tangents about things that had nothing to do with music. Every day, at least 2 to 3 students would leave class in tears. We complained to the higher-ups, and they repeatedly brushed us off. He made students hate attending his music classes, and many dropped band and orchestra as a result. One of the classes he taught was supposed to be Introduction to Music Theory. For those who don't know music, this would be a class that should typically teach things like different types of chords, the definition of music symbols, the logic behind key changes, etc. At the first class of the year, there were about 25 kids enrolled. Most of these were music and drama kids who wanted to be teachers or performers in the arts one day. On the first day, he handed us a quiz because he wanted to see how much we knew. I think there were maybe 3 to 5 kids who were able to attempt a single question on the quiz. No one got a single answer right. That's how advanced it was. Imagine signing up for what you think is a basic pre-algebra class and walking into advanced calculus. This teacher spent the entire class period berating us for not being prepared when no one could even attempt his quiz. We told him, "This is an intro class. None of us have learned anything like this before." And his response was, "Really? I thought this was an advanced class." The next class period, there were maybe 15 kids enrolled. He did the same thing, asked us to perform something we can't even understand, and then berated us for not being prepared. At every class, he would say, "I thought you all were musicians. This is supposed to be an advanced class." By the end of the second week, there were 6 students left enrolled in this class, including myself. He softened up slightly to those of us who stayed and seemed to think he was his prize students and that this was his class of elites. Think Professor Slughorn from Harry Potter. In truth, we all thought he was insane and cruel, but the 6 of us had sufficient music background and experience to understand a fraction of his lessons. Without the bell curve, we all would have failed this class. A few months go by, and we're at the end of the first semester. By now, every student connected to music in the school hated this guy, and repeated complaints had done nothing to fix the problem. The admins filed away every complaint, but never did anything more than remind him that he's supposed to be more kind to students. He changes nothing and still berates students and makes them cry. So when it comes to the final exam for his theory class, he decides that he wants to give it to us early so that on the day the final is supposed to be scheduled, we can have a class party. Of the 6 of us left, 4 of us have the same period after his class together as well. That class was AP English, and we were prepping for the AP test. We had no problem with a class party in music right before the AP prep exam, so we didn't complain. The day comes of our music final exam, and after we finish the test, he tells us that for our class party, he wants to take us all to breakfast at a new IHOP that opened 20 minutes away. His class was first period. We try to tell him all the issues with this plan. We aren't allowed to leave campus without permission slips. It was a closed campus policy due to an incident where a student who left campus for lunch got hit by a car and was killed. We will not get back in time for second period, which is a final exam. He doesn't have permission to remove us from the campus? What if there's an emergency and we are unaccounted for because we aren't even at the school? His solution was to tell us that after the start of class on our final class day, he would be going to IHOP, and if we wanted to join him, that was our choice. But if we didn't, we would have to stay in the classroom and not bring attention to the teacher that there was no class and no teacher. Without talking about it to each other, the 6 of us saw an opportunity to finally get the admin's attention to the complete disregard this teacher had for rules and policies. We made sure to inform our English teacher that we might be late to class on the day of the final due to a class field trip for music theory. She was irritated and reminded us that this final was very important and that she would not give us extra time if we came in late. We told her that we understood and gave her details about where we would be and what we would be doing and who we would be with. She said she still expected us to be in her class. On the day of the final, we all went to IHOP. It took forever to get there because of construction, and forever to get our food because the restaurant was newly opened and had a large number of customers. We got back to the school halfway through our second period class. The admins were waiting for us. Security was waiting for us. My English teacher had called the front office to complain that 4 of her best students were missing and that she was fairly certain we weren't even on campus. The admins had checked attendance and seen that we were all marked present that morning, and they had searched the entire school looking for our class. The 4 of us walked into our English final to a livid teacher. We knew she was pissed at us, but couldn't punish us beyond saying we had the same remaining time as the rest of the class, since we had been with a teacher in our absence. None of us did as well in the final as we could have if we had the full 87 minutes, but we were doing well enough in the class already that the lesser marks didn't affect our overall grade too much. The band teacher had a private reprimand that was so loud the entire school could hear it. He was confused as to why the administration was upset that he took minor children off campus without permission or notice, without proper school transportation, or even a good reason. He stayed with his usual attitude, but this time towards the admins. "Why are you guys so incompetent about this? They're old enough to drive. What's the problem?" The English teacher, who I actually adore and was one of the best teachers I've ever had, absolutely went mama bear on the administration about how they could continue to employ someone who disrespects the other teachers so much as to deprive his students of their final exams and put them in potentially dangerous circumstances. He told us to drive ourselves to the restaurant, and any accidents or medical issues would have been the school's fault. He was fired later that day. Many of the students had a gleeful but confused reaction since the 6 of us weren't talking to anyone about it. All most people knew was that this tyrant of a teacher was gone. We didn't spread the story very much of how it happened because we still feared being reprimanded for our involvement, since he technically gave us a choice to go with him or stay. But I always smiled when people gossiped about what the final straw was that got him fired. Top comments. Comment. When I was a sophomore in high school, I had an English teacher who was just like this guy. Nothing as dramatic as the original poster story, but definitely acted like he was teaching an advanced literature class at Harvard instead of an intro class. One specific funny thing I do remember, we were reading sections of some book out loud, and he criticized one student for clearly saying the word forehead, as in a person's forehead. He insisted it was pronounced like forehead, even after the whole class argued with him. He wouldn't give in and was visibly annoyed at the end of class. A few weeks later, he gets finished yelling at the class about something, and it's really quiet. When he turns his back on the class, someone quietly but very clearly says, "Forehead!" The whole class cracked up, and he turned red with anger. Think he lasted a few years only. Edit. Some people asking where the teacher was from. This incident took place in the United States, and I believe he was raised in the United States as well. Some people are asking where the teacher was from. This incident took place in the United States, and I believe he was raised in the United States as well. Comment. I think there's an issue where some teachers decide that their education level determines the baseline of their teaching, or they teach at the level they wish they could and not the actual level of the course, which is truly insane. One of the best teachers I ever had was my physics teacher. He had a PhD and spent summers doing research at CERN, but he knew how to teach the material at our level, but also how to tie it into the most cutting-edge advances in the field, which he explained at our level. I think in the original poster's case, some people just aren't meant to be teachers. Answer. I had a college professor at my Keck school. Brand new teacher, her first year on her own. Second year C++ course. The textbook we had was approved the year before while the previous teacher was there, who was a greatest of all time in the computer field. He could have taught the course with his eyes closed. I've never seen a teacher before or since totally lose it in class so much. It was an advanced university text, not suitable for a 2-year tech college. Every single one of us who stuck it out were passed because we actually showed up and attempted the lessons. At the same school, an accounting instructor became furious with the administration because the textbook he wanted to use for cost accounting was dismissed in favor of one that was, again, designed for advanced studies at a university level. Every single test was graded on a curve. He understood the material, but he knew most of us would not understand it. Comment. I had a terrible teacher in college. I was a Spanish minor and was taking a course on Spanish literature, taught in Spanish. We would read short stories and poems and discuss them in class. All was well. However, she would give us tests with questions like, "How long did the author live in Madrid?" These questions were completely irrelevant to understanding the story or, well, anything. It was very confusing. We tried to tell her repeatedly that these questions were unreasonable and unfair. She did not take it well. The entire semester continued like that. Our grades were lower in this class because of those frustrating tests. We talked to students who were taking the same course with another instructor, and their experience was very different. Their class was easy. I was only pursuing a minor, so a low grade was annoying, but not the end of the world. However, there were Spanish majors in the class, and they were extremely upset. We tried again to explain our perspective to her, but nothing changed. After our final exam of the semester, which was more of the same nonsense, 5 or 6 of us left together to go to a computer lab. We co-wrote a complaint letter to the department head. Nothing happened. There was no response. At least, I never had to take a class with her again. Answer: your mistake was waiting until the end of the semester to complain. I had to deal with a professor who was committing Americans with Disabilities Act violations, and the administration told us that the mistake most college students make is not reporting issues quickly enough. I think it also helped that 2 of the students complaining had the highest grades in the school and had won prestigious international scholarships. That is just my theory. Comment: when I was in 12th grade, we were reading Native Son. The book contains racist language, and I attended a predominantly black school. I am black as well. My English teacher, who was a white woman, paused at a section in the book to talk about her father, who asked her when she was going to stop teaching using a racial slur and go back to a white school. She even said herself that sometimes she was wasting her time with a bunch of you blacks to a room full of about 20 black students, and that maybe her father was right, since she expected everyone in the classroom to be drug dealers or pregnant or parents by that time next year. This happened on a Tuesday. By Friday, her car had been vandalized 3 times, people were talking about her when she walked down the hallway, and every single parent of the entire senior class called to file complaints with both the school and the school board. She was fired and barred from teaching. Goodbye forever, Mrs. D. Comment: not quite as bad, but in my sophomore year, we got a new choir teacher because the previous one was returning to school to study music further. Our high school had an open enrollment choir and 2 audition-only competition choirs. I was thrilled to get into one of the competition choirs as a sophomore, since we did not have freshmen on campus, and I had auditioned under the previous choir director before he realized he would be leaving. I'm not sure how much of this was due to the administration's cost-cutting and how much was the new choir teacher's lack of effort, but they only hired her to teach 2 classes instead of the usual 3 or 4. This meant the competition choirs were combined into one class, despite being different groups. She decided to make us one large choir, which would have been fine, but she also had no intention of putting in the effort to take us to competitions or maintain the legacy of what had once been a highly successful choir program. We later found out that her previous music teaching job had been in an elementary school, where most of the children were still learning English. On the first day of class, she conducted first-grade-style attention exercises, such as saying, 1, 2, 3, eyes on me, and expecting us to chant back, 1, 2, eyes on you. The class lost many students because it was not what any of us had signed up for, and she insisted on treating us like elementary students instead of high schoolers. All of us who switched classes at the semester change were called into the vice principal's office to explain why we were leaving. I had already arranged with the previous choir director to officially be in the class for only 1 semester and put in extracurricular work to stay involved with the choir because I needed to complete a mandatory elective credit. I explained this to the vice principal, but also made it clear that I would have left the choir anyway if that had not been the case. Her first year was a probationary year before union protections applied, so she was not rehired. Sadly, our choir program did not recover during my remaining time there, and we did not reorganize any competition groups. Comment: what is it with middle and high school music teachers? They are either the kindest, wanting to inspire kids to love music, or they are egotistical maniacs with personality disorders. My terrible high school orchestra teacher was finally fired the year after I graduated, after another teacher complained about his inappropriate behavior. Of course, the adults' complaint was taken seriously over the numerous student complaints, including those about the time he showed up to an extracurricular practice drunk, made multiple students cry, and told highly inappropriate jokes in class, despite some of the best middle schoolers being allowed to join the high school orchestra. Fortunately, the choir teacher who took over as head of the music department was a very kind, highly talented, and warm-hearted man. Comment. I am a special education teacher, and I currently work with a teacher who is a more level-headed version of that man. When students struggle, she says things like, "I do not understand why you do not know this," or "You should know this by now." She follows the curriculum, presumably because she has to, but she does not seem to comprehend that some children have difficulties. If a child asks for help, or for a new pencil or marker, she is always rude, saying things like, "What happened to the last one?" or telling the child they will have to do without. I understand being frustrated about children losing supplies, but if she gives a child a marker that is already nearly dry, she should not get angry, especially when children ask for help with the material. There have been times when a child needed help with something that I, as the special education teacher, could not assist with, such as asking for supplies, since I am in her classroom and do not know where things are. The child is often terrified to ask her for help and does not want me to ask her because they know they will be scolded. I have seen children choose to sit in class without a pencil rather than ask her for one because she is so rude. The children often use finger counting to help with addition or subtraction, which she dislikes and scolds them for. But she does not realize that part of why they do it in her class is because they are afraid of giving a wrong answer and are using it as a safety net to ensure accuracy. However, when the child is in my office, where I expect mistakes, they are somehow able to do the calculations in their heads. I wonder if it has anything to do with feeling less anxious with me, allowing them to think more clearly and be more willing to try a more advanced method. Everyone dislikes her. There is another teacher in the building whom I do not like because she is harsh with the children, but that teacher has made efforts to improve her practice and genuinely cares about her students. The teacher I mentioned earlier does not. There was an instructor at a technical college I attended who thought he was untouchable because he was the only person there with a master's degree required to teach the bachelor's level class he taught. He frequently arrived late to the classes that students were paying for. Many students failed because he was not an effective instructor, and complaints to the dean were unanswered for a long time. The school finally had enough grounds to dismiss him during the final exam. He handed out a 200-question test instead of the 50-question test provided by the school, and then stepped outside. With no one there to supervise, one student did what many would do and searched online for the answers. Not only did they find the answers, but they also found the exact test the instructor had used, complete with the answer key. A few other students finished their tests in record time as well, and went to look for him to submit their work. When they could not find him, they went to the dean and reported that he had left the class at the beginning of the exam and could not be located. The dean searched for a while on the small campus and eventually found him in his car. The school was forced to offer the students a retake of the class free of charge. I had an awful programming teacher in high school. This was an introductory programming class offered as an elective where we were supposed to learn Visual Basic and the fundamentals of coding. His assignments were extremely vague and overly complex, requiring hours of work. The grading scale and expectations constantly changed to the point where the entire class was failing. I had a 30% overall grade in this class. As a junior taking advanced placement classes and applying for colleges, this low failing grade caused significant stress. We complained several times to the administration, but our concerns were initially ignored until 3/4 of the class, including myself, refused to leave the administration office until they took action. This led to the school contacting our parents, who were aware of the situation to varying degrees and were furious with the school for employing someone who had no teaching or education training or certification and who, due to his own incompetence, was failing all of us. Since this was a private school, the parents had more influence over the administration. Anyone who wanted to drop the class was allowed to do so without penalty. I spent the rest of the semester shelving books in the library as a library assistant, which was a wonderful experience. I should have pursued a career in library science. If you like the story, subscribe to the Sneaky Pigeon channel to get more cool and interesting stories. And if you want to support us even more, like the video, write a comment, and turn on the bell to receive notifications about the latest videos. See you in the next videos. Bye-bye.